Hey, it's Mike here, and today we're going to be taking a look at a video called What I Learned from My Failed Coffee Shop. Now, this is a little bit different from what I usually react to. I usually kind of go after the ones that are a little bit more hypey, but I've always been interested in what would happen if you start a coffee shop, and people always like, oh, I'm going to start a coffee shop, or I'm going to start a bar, or something like that, and they don't think about all the logistics that go into it, or a restaurant. I mean, that just sounds like something that would be horrible. But anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and like this video. If you guys can please like this video as well. It really helps out with my YouTube channel and I appreciate it. And if you're not subscribed already, hit that subscribe button and bell notification. Let's jump into it and see why this coffee shop failed.
So I started a specialty cafe with my sister in December 2022, and I really wasn't prepared for how hard it would be. In the end, we closed the shop in March 23, and I didn't really know how to talk about it, so I didn't make a video.
It's really hard when you go into something like this and you put so much of yourself into it, and to fail and to give up, because you're always thinking, okay, maybe if I give it a little bit longer, am I giving up too early on it? It's hard to find that balance between quitting too early and also just quitting too late.
I had all this content planned to try and get people to come and buy a coffee or buy beans from our roastery, but in the end, I scrapped all the videos I made about the cafe. It was really tough. After closing, I was completely broke, and I put most of my savings and several months of my time into the cafe with nothing really to show for it, and I had to go back out and get a real job again. But I learned.
That's tough, especially when you're a YouTuber. That's like one of the things that I really don't want to have to do someday is go out and get a real job again. I mean, it's always something that could happen. You never know what's going to happen with the internet marketing world or with the YouTube community or whatever. I mean, things can change overnight.
I learned a lot from my failed cafe venture, and I want to share my experiences with all of you. So what happened? The first thing, probably the main mistake, was the location. We started up in the little village of Hilton in Cambridgeshire, close to where my sister lives. So I moved in with her while we got things set up.
Here's the thing though, he knows the location. That's kind of good. If it's like close to where his sister lives, then they should know that, okay, this is a good place to open a cafe. It's got a lot of street traffic, etc. I mean, it'd be much harder to open a cafe in some place that you had no idea what the area was actually all about.
The space we got was very, very reasonable in terms of rent. And since the people who lived in the village there had been asking for a cafe for a long time, we thought that they'd come along and get a daily coffee, and that would be enough to make a business of it. And some of them did and were regulars, like the guy who came in for an espresso a few times a week and always wanted to try the different specialty beans we had on offer, and a lady who came in on her morning break for a pistachio latte for a bit of a treat. But it was much harder to get word around and become a local third space than I expected. I've worked in digital marketing before, and running ads on Instagram is fine for digital products, but not really much of a driver for local business in more of a countryside space where lots of people aren't really on social media that much.
I think it's really hard to go from doing digital marketing to doing local marketing, especially the fact that you are used to such a larger audience. When you go to marketing to a very small area, you're so limited. And when you're doing online marketing, you just have the world to market to.
That's why I now realize that you really need to have anywhere between 9 to 12 months of expenses to start just about any cafe. That means not just paying for the machines and the space to be done up and open for business with an empty bank account. You need to be paying salaries, paying for coffee and electricity, which in our case was a massive expense in 2022. It honestly just takes a really long time for grassroots word of mouth to spread around and have enough people coming in through the door to make a sustainable coffee business. I spent too many mornings to count walking through the freezing cold British winter at 7:30 a.m. to open a cafe that sometimes didn't have a single customer until after 9. And
that's really, really hard to do. There was a cafe that in the place that we just lived in that was open until 2 p.m. and I actually would sit in there. We went in there a couple times, and I would listen to the owner talk about like marketing and how they're going to bring in new sandwiches and blah, blah, blah. I mean, you're always thinking about your business, always thinking about how you can improve it, but it's tough.
As deflating and frustrating as that was, a cafe needs to make a promise and fulfill that promise, which means being open at 8 a.m. so people can grab a coffee before work. Making a promise and delivering on it, I would say, is the second important thing I learned about. My sister had a really good saying that I think is really critical for almost any business today, and especially for cafes, and that is everything you do should be the absolute best you can do it. And that really does mean everything. If the coffee comes out a little bit wrong, you can't think, oh, that guy won't notice notice he just wants a caramel skinny latte and he doesn't know anything about good coffee. Your promise is you showing up to do the best you can do, and that means if you didn't distribute right and the coffee comes out looking like crap, you gotta remake the drink. When you're already not making any money, it can be hard to cut your margins even more.
I disagree in a little bit. If they're too much of a perfectionist, like it's nice trying to give a nice experience to the customer, but I mean, if you're obsessing about it, and it's causing you to not even get things done. Like if he was to the point where he wasn't even opening up the store because everything wasn't perfect to do it, then that would be an issue. But I do like the fact that they're trying to give a good experience to the customers.
By throwing away an espresso shot, but it will cost you a lot more if you don't, because a certain number of people will realize that you don't really care about your promise. I think we honestly did our best, and I made every drink the best I possibly could. But again, bootstrapping a cafe business like this is really hard. We really couldn't afford the higher end espresso machines and grinders that are good enough to make an amazing coffee all day, every day. And also the work on the interior to give people a sense that they're in a specialty coffee shop. If you've been into specialty coffee for a while, you know what it feels like to walk into a proper cafe space. I can usually tell just by looking at the photos of a coffee spot on Google Maps whether or not the coffee is good, or when I look at the machines they have, or how proudly they display the kinds of coffee they use. Ours wasn't a particularly fancy space,
Yeah, I mean, that's just so basic. A lot of people, I know my wife, she loves going to coffee shops, but she likes going to them not just for the coffee, but for the atmosphere. So it's you want to go in there, you want to go in a place that feels kind of homey and nice. And that picture right there doesn't look like a place that I would see on Google Maps and be like, hey, honey, let's go there.
Didn't have the money for that, but we did have great coffee and spent more money than we could really afford at this stage in the business buying higher quality specialty grade green beans. And the reviews of our cafe on Google Maps kind of showed that people noticed this. We had a house espresso, which was a medium roast Brazilian, and then for the specialty beans, we'd change them and have new flavors with tasting cards for people to try. One was a really excellent Ethiopian bean, and we also had an El Salvador that was just delicious.
I wonder, for that type of a location, it looked like a smaller location, if people don't really understand what good coffee is. Like sometimes you think that your customers are just like you, and maybe this guy's a kind of a coffee snob, I'm saying in a nice way, where he like really understands his coffee, but probably most people don't. I drink coffee every day, but I'm definitely not an expert.
My sister's partner David is a coffee roaster, and either he or I roasted the house blend on a Garanti 5 kilo, and I did all of the specialty beans on my Kaleido M6 in smaller batches to keep everything fresh. The espresso machine was a La Spaziale E5 Compact 2-group, very affordable, but of course lacking some of the features of a high-end espresso machine. So I'm sure I could have done a much more satisfying drink with the coffee we roasted if I had something like a Sanremo Cafe Racer or a La Marzocco GB5S, which is...
Look at those. Those things look expensive. I bet those are like $10,000-$20,000. I don't know. They look expensive.
The machine I really wanted, but in no way could afford. The grinder we used was a Malkonig K30 flat burr grinder, which did a decent job, even if it was a little hard to adjust. And then I used my Turin DF83 for single dosing with different specialty beans we had. The difficulty with doing specialty beans in a low traffic shop is that every day you still need to double check and redial in the beans if you want to make the best espresso you can. Lots of things affect how a shot comes out. So if it's a little more humid or colder, for example, you need to adjust your grind settings. This wastes a shot or two first thing in the morning, and then perhaps again at lunchtime when it's a bit warmer. So when we had days where we literally only had like 10 customers, that meant that dialing in the coffee for those customers raised the variable costs of coffee beans by maybe 30% because I had to redial in with 3 different beans. So it was either...
I feel like he could have done a really good coffee shop if he had some more money to invest and he was in a place with more traffic. Like, he sounds like he's really passionate about it, but it sounds like the location didn't have enough traffic.
Raise those costs or have slightly worse coffee, aka break my quality promise, which is something I did not want to do. Some things were good though. My sister is really good at hunting for deals, and she found a table on wheels with drawers and a flowjet powered tap and jug rinser and everything built in, so we didn't need to plumb anything into the actual building. That would have been very expensive, and having a portable setup to start off with allowed us to move the counter after we first started to find a good position that was easiest for customers and gave us the most space for a table and chairs. Putting ourselves on Google Maps with a few good pictures was really important too, as we had a few people come in in after looking for a cafe to stop at while driving or biking through, but there just wasn't much footfall because of where the cafe was. If you aren't in a city centre and don't have lots of people walking past and coming in, you have to create a community. And that's a tough thing. That's about culture and becoming a third space where people find it comfortable to come in and relax with their family or meet with someone for a coffee date or just grab a coffee as part of their morning routine. Some people try to go big and flashy with expensive build-outs and spending investors' money on marketing campaigns, but in my experience, this only works with brands that have a really smart approach and have planned everything thoroughly. I saw this kind of big launch a lot in Tokyo.
Dude, that one looked good. That one a second ago. This looks nice too. Looks different.
Really fancy builds with fresh-looking brand designs, starting in high-footfall areas like Shibuya, Ginza, or Shinjuku, but then closing up a few months later. Big opens and branding can work, but community is the core of where a coffee shop's longevity comes from. So we tried to do that by running coffee cupping events in the shop. We did 2 of them, and both did quite well actually, and were basically sold out. We also helped to organize a warm hub event at our local village hall, which, if any of you Brits remember, was basically getting people to come to a local place and do things like games, and in this case also drink coffee, so they could all turn off their heating at home for a few hours each week to save on energy bills.
He sounds like he had some really good ideas with his cafe. I'm actually really sad for him because it sounds like he really is heartbroken about this. He put in a lot into this. I'm sure he's successful at other stuff.
I think this really helped, and we had a few people come into the cafe after trying our coffee at the warm hub. But winter really made getting the community involved very hard. We just took too long to open. I moved home in September and we set to work plastering the walls, painting, redoing the lights, finding a coffee machine and a bar setup, and we did almost all of this ourselves to save money because we had a pretty tight budget. And we also had some fun doing it as well. But I think if we just paid someone to do it and opened in the start of October before it got too cold, we might have built up more of a community before winter set in. We opened in mid-December when it wasn't only freezing cold, but we also had a massive energy crisis in the UK with heating bills going through the roof. The cafe...
It's not hard. It's a hard time to get people out. They're doing things. They're off doing holiday shopping. They're not necessarily looking to go sit in a little cafe.
Itself also wasn't that warm. The walls were thin and the only heating we had was a small electric heater, which I would have my hands on for half the day to keep them warm so they didn't snap off every time I'd pulled a shot. I actually got the dreaded barista wrist, which is kind of like carpal tunnel from locking in the portafilter too hard in the cold every day. And I don't know if you've ever had barista wrist before, but it's pretty painful. It really sucks, and it affected me for about 8 months afterwards. Obviously, with the weather being so grim, and it was really grim, people weren't as willing to venture out and try the new village coffee shop. So all of these things combined so that we just couldn't keep the shop going. It was growing slowly every month, but I was also really struggling having just moved back from Tokyo. I didn't really have many friends in the UK, and being in the countryside rather than a city like I was used to meant that I was not having the best time. I
bet that was really hard for him too. He's just coming back. He's trying to get used to being in a place where he doesn't have a lot of friends. He's trying to start this business. He's got the whole seasonal thing going on where it's cold and grim. That didn't help him.
I do a few videos during this sort of 4 or 5 month period, and I'm glad I did because it kept the channel going. After closing up the shop, I moved back to Hertfordshire, where I am now, so I could be closer to London and go and meet with new and old friends. I got a full-time job after March, working on a very successful YouTube channel, managing a video team and working on creative direction, strategy, and analytics, and in the end started making thumbnails for the channel as well. Videos on my own channel slowed down a bit, and I took a few months completely not really thinking about it after my dad passed away in August last year. I think I really needed this time off, and I did consider quitting YouTube completely, as I didn't really...
I think he's doing great videos. I mean, this is a really well put together video. He definitely should go all in on YouTube.
I feel like I was able to put in enough time to really succeed in the way I wanted to. YouTube is a tough mistress, and if you aren't a content creator, you might not know that YouTube ad revenue is basically next to nothing recently. It's a nice bit of extra...
It's gone down. My own revenue's gone down as well, and it's very low. I don't know what's going on. I think that maybe it's summertime, maybe this just kind of goes up and down, but we'll see how the end of the year goes.
Extra cash for people who are filming things that aren't expensive to do, but with every piece of coffee gear costing hundreds of pounds and espresso machines costing thousands, it becomes impossible to break even with YouTube ad revenue and affiliate sales alone. I was basically running the channel at a loss for years, and I still am now. I'm still doing it because I love talking about coffee, especially latte art and coffee gear, and doing this channel has given me so many great connections with people in the coffee industry and also access to advanced previews of gear and machines through companies that like the videos I do. Even with the big time commitment and personal cost, honestly, getting comments that my videos helped you do good latte art hearts for the first time, or pull a decent shot of light roast espresso that you couldn't figure out before, is really the most satisfying thing about doing this.
I don't know if he does it already, but if he's not doing it, he needs to be doing reviews of these, like in-depth reviews of these coffee machines. Like, it sounds like he knows what he's talking about, and he could give a perspective that other people don't. I hope he's doing them.
While I was on my break from the channel, I went to Madrid for a month, partly to get out of the UK for a bit after my dad died, and partly to see if it was somewhere I would like to live in the future, and also to take some Latin dance classes, which is one of my hobbies. While I was out there, I met Koke on Instagram. He's at Don't Channel Me Baby, and we met for coffee, and I went to see his incredible coffee setup at his place. This is by far the most extravagant home espresso setup I've ever seen, and we were dialing in delicious coffees, using different techniques and tools, and talking with him and his friend Ruman, who owns Dubov Coffee in Madrid, honestly made me really excited about coffee again. So after coming back to the UK, I started making videos. I started thinking about what I could do differently for the coffee channel and get more into the deeper science of making coffee and the machines and gear that are changing so rapidly these days. Then I went to Host Milan in October and met some very cool people in the industry who know so much more than I ever dreamed possible about coffee. And I also met some of my favorite content creators too, and got even more inspired to make this channel work.
I didn't even know there was so much of like a coffee YouTube channel niche. Like, this is something new that I'm experienced today. Did you guys know about that?
So I started saving as much money as I could for my job, and in April, I quit. Since then, I've been working on making a product, something real and tangible that I'd want to buy for myself or other friends who are into espresso. And that product is a journal for espresso lovers based on something I've been using for years to keep track of my grinder settings, temperatures, doses, and my favorite coffee beans. It's going to be called the Brew Ledger, and it's a little book for espresso lovers. I'm not quite ready to show it yet, as I don't actually have a...
It's kind of cool. He's putting out a product, and it's interesting that the whole journal niche is huge. Like, people sell these journals in multiple different niches, and people buy them. Like, I've seen people sell hundreds of thousands, if not more, of journals. It's pretty crazy.
Physical book. I'll be getting the first run of a few hundred books from the printers in the coming weeks, and I'll be doing crowdfunding very soon to sell the first editions and order more copies if the book proves to be popular.
So, what do you guys think about this? I feel bad for him that he put so much time and effort and money into starting his coffee shop, but you know, hopefully it will go on to mean bigger and better things for him in the future. Hopefully he'll learn something from it, and he'll be able to be successful with something else here. It sounds like he's moving on to doing like a journal and whatnot. So that's great. Let me know in the comments below if you've started a business like this, if you started a coffee shop or a restaurant or a bar, and if it worked out or maybe it didn't. Tell us that story in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure you hit that like button. It helps out with my channel a lot, and hit that subscribe button and bell notification. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you again in my next video. Thanks.